If you are currently experiencing pelvic pain or dysfunction down there, and you'd like to know the 5 things that I wish I knew when I first got symptoms, you are not going to want to miss this video series called The Tenets of Recovery. Now, these 5 tenets or principles not only took me from agonizing pain and dysfunction to actually getting my life back, but they're actively helping several other men. My name is Keith, and you're watching the Unbroken Pelvis channel. Let's get into it. So the tenets of recovery contain 5 key principles that, when applied, will definitely maximize your chances of recovery. Pelvic floor dysfunction is complex, and there's many factors that can cause someone's pelvic floor to basically freak out. These tenets address the factors involved, and each one has its own unique solutions. In today's video, I'm going to cover a brief overview of each tenet, and then over the next 5 videos, we're going to take a deeper dive into each principle and discuss detailed solutions for each one. But for now, I just want to challenge your thinking and shed some light on the big picture and offer you practical strategies to overcome. I want you to have hope and peace of mind so that you can begin your recovery. So without further ado, tenet number 1 is the mind-body component. Let's talk about stress. Stress affects just about everybody, right? And stress has a profound effect on the human body. Stress can cause inflammation. Stress can cause muscle tightening. Stress can cause depression. Everybody deals with stress, whether it's relationships or work or health. There are 2 default modes to the central nervous system. We talk about this in the channel all the time, but you've got your fight or flight, which is your sympathetic response. And this happens anytime that you have a stressful situation, you're scared, you're dealing with anxiety, you're in pain, or you have some sort of discomfort or dis-ease. Namely, disease like pelvic floor dysfunction is a literal dis-ease of the body. And the second default mode for the central nervous system is the parasympathetic, also known as the rest and digest. This happens anytime you're at peace with the world, things are going great. Anytime some good news happens, anytime, if you're getting a back rub, that'll trigger the parasympathetic response. You're like, that warm feeling comes over your body. Anytime you're asleep, you're in a parasympathetic state. And unfortunately, the default mode for anyone dealing with pain on a regular basis or dysfunction is the sympathetic state. I know sympathetic sounds great, like sympathy. No, it's the exact opposite. It is the fight or flight. Your adrenaline is pumping through your veins. You're dealing with anger. You're dealing with rage. The science is pretty clear. We know stress is really, really bad for the body. It can cause inflammation. It can cause muscle guarding, increase in muscle tone, increase in pain sensitivity. And of course, there's a vicious cycle that happens. Whenever we experience pain, then there's muscular guarding. Because of the muscle guarding, there's restricted mobility. Muscles will then get weak and go into atrophy. And of course, that means decreased function. And that decreased function leads to emotional and mental stress and further exacerbating the pain. And the cycle goes around and around and around. At some point, somewhere, somebody has to break that cycle of pain and poor thinking, and that's where the mind-body component comes in. I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first child, and we went to go visit the midwife. And while we were there, the midwife shared a story, an analogy, if you will, of a deer. And basically, this deer was in labor, and the baby doe was on its way through the birthing canal when all of a sudden the deer hears something rustling in the trees. It was a hunter. The deer knew that there was immediate danger. And suddenly, the deer literally stopped giving birth, baby halfway out. The deer gets up and runs away. And the deer did not finish the birthing process until she knew she was safe. And this demonstrates the body's amazing ability to cope and manage with stress. There is a physiological response when we're afraid, when we're in pain, and that physiological response will literally change the neurochemicals being released in our brain, how our muscles respond, how we perceive pain, and what we do when we're under a threat. And this includes normal bodily functions like using the restroom or sexual activity. And those who are dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction, unfortunately, are stuck in a vicious cycle of fear and guarding. And that guarding increases pain sensitivity. Now, in my next video, we're going to take a deeper dive into this topic of the mind-body component. But I want to let you know that there are several practical tools that you can use to reduce your overall anxiety level, such as box breathing, meditation like the NSDR technique or the non-sleep deep rest protocol. There's somatic tracking and several others that are practical tools that you can implement day to day to reduce your anxiety level and break that cycle of fear, pain, and guarding. You know, a lot of guys end up going to doctors when they have pelvic floor dysfunction, and the doctors unfortunately tell them that they can't find anything wrong and it's all in your head. And while that certainly hurts to hear, and it is an insult to everything that is happening in the body, there's an element of truth to it. I'm not going to say that pelvic floor dysfunction is just a mental disorder. There are clearly physical symptoms that are scientifically verifiable to indicate that someone has PFD. But to the extent that the brain has powerful influence over the body, then there are elements of this being in our heads that we can control to reduce our dysfunction. If you want to experience recovery, you're going to have to take some steps to reduce your anxiety. You'll need to get a hold of the mental factors that are driving your symptoms and putting you in a state of that cycle of pain. That brings us to our next tenet, the neuromuscular component. So we've learned that there's a connection between the brain chemistry and the body's response, but there's another layer of the onion to peel back here, and that is how the muscles respond to what's happening up here. There's a way for us to control the muscles from the brain. Secondary or outside of anxiety, we can learn to consciously control how our muscles respond to stress. In other words, while we are stressed and we feel our muscles tensing, we can do some practical exercises to negate the impact that the brain is having on the muscles. While we're still in a state of active anxiety, we can take steps to break that connection between the brain and our muscles guarding. When we're in a state of fight or flight, there is a subconscious clenching that happens in the pelvic floor. It's a guarding response. And we can learn to short circuit that intervention from the brain and cause the muscles to learn to relax. This is neuroplasticity. I'm sure you've heard the term before, but it is a profound tool and a profound science. Outside of or secondary to anxiety and stress, we can actually learn to stop that subconscious muscle guarding that's going on down there. Likewise, you can have addressed the anxiety piece and learn to lower your overall anxiety level, but you might have picked up some bad behaviors on the way with clenching, and that might be through movement, that might be through just as the day progresses and you get busier during the day, you can start learning to clench those muscles subconsciously. And so this tenet involves taking practical steps to be aware of the clenching and stop them. We can also develop poor breathing habits. In other words, poor diaphragmatic control. We get these habits along the way when we're, always in a state of panic and we're shallow breathing and we're not allowing our diaphragm to open up and move the muscles in the abdomen and the pelvic floor. And this creates some tension down there. And so the neuromuscular tenet involves being aware of this and taking steps to relearn how to breathe properly. Again, I'm going to cover this in more detail in a future video, but for now, know that you can take steps to learn how to breathe properly. You can take steps to learn how to deactivate muscles that are seemingly tight and won't relax. And of course, this is done through deep diaphragmatic breathing and pelvic floor expansion and reverse Kegels. There's additional techniques like foam rolling, stretching, myofascial release, whether it's performed by a licensed professional or self-performed myofascial release, both externally and internally. We'll take a deep dive into these in a future video. The third tenet is the musculoskeletal component. Many with pelvic floor dysfunction have underlying musculoskeletal imbalances, whether it's core weakness or glute weakness or weakness in the legs. These imbalances tend to create an environment where the pelvis is going to respond in a negative way. Now, is it possible to have musculoskeletal imbalances and not have pelvic floor dysfunction? Absolutely. Look at the average person Most people have some sort of imbalance somewhere. But is it also possible to have pelvic floor dysfunction and not have a musculoskeletal imbalance that is affecting it in some way, shape, or form? I would argue that in most cases, probably not. If you have pelvic floor dysfunction, there's probably some sort of musculoskeletal imbalance that's causing your symptoms to stick around for longer than you'd like. And again, whether it's core weakness or glute weakness, which tend to be the most common, these imbalances are going to keep your pelvis in an unhappy state. The pelvic floor is a master compensator. When the back and the core and the glutes aren't doing their job, your pelvic floor is going to get super tight and protect all of your valuable assets.
Our asset
is the most valuable asset.
And many will turn to stretching in response to pelvic floor dysfunction. And because they probably feel the imbalances, there's probably some tightness in the abs or the lower abs, or the glutes and the piriformis are like a rock. And so stretching seems to be a very logical step towards reducing some of that tension, some of that hypertonicity. And there's nothing wrong with stretching, but I'm going to tell you this: you cannot stretch your way out of pelvic floor dysfunction. Stretching can help with symptoms, but it's very temporary in nature. And if you've tried stretching before, you've done the hour-long Cure CPPS stretching protocol and found yourself still struggling with symptoms, there may be an element missing from your recovery plan. And that element is strengthening. We have to have a strong foundation in order for our pelvic floor to relax. Now, before you just go to the gym and start bussing out 100 squats, know that we have to go through the components, the tenets, one by one. You have to learn to reduce your anxiety first. That's why it's the first tenet. Then you have to learn to consciously relax the muscles in your pelvic floor before you embark on number 3. You don't want to start strengthening if everything is like a rock down there, because that's only going to cause your symptoms to get worse. However, establishing a healthy baseline of strength in the glutes, the legs, and the core is going to be foundational for your pelvic floor to learn to relax. And learning how to properly activate your muscles is the key part of this. So what's the solution to a weak core and weak glutes? Well, in addition to strengthening, it's functional movement. It's learning to activate the right muscles at the right time to establish that foundation of strength. If you just go to the gym and start doing squats, but you're not properly activating your core, you're not using your glutes, if you're using your back to lift and not your core and your glutes, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt and possibly even injure yourself in addition to your pelvic pain.
ain't nobody got time for that.
Functional movement is the application of kinesiology in science to your daily moving patterns. A lot of people, when they move, they don't move well. They don't move properly. When they bend down to pick something up, they're just kind of lunging forward. And this puts a tremendous amount of stress and strain on your back and on your pelvis. Because the pelvis likes to compensate for core weakness, it's going to activate. And once it activates, that creates pain. And that pain, that nerve compression, will put you back into that pain cycle. See, that pain cycle, it's got several exit points. You can exit at the point of pain through somatic tracking. You can exit at the point of muscle guarding by learning to activate the right muscles and deactivate the ones that are activated when they shouldn't be. You can exit at restricted mobility by learning how to remobilize your joints, the joints of the hip, the internal and external rotators. Sometimes they get tight. That's where stretching comes in. Muscle weakness and activity, that's an exit point because you can start to strengthen the muscles that are weak. And so all of these exit points help us create a game plan on addressing the symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. And functional movement can help us do that too by learning to use the right muscles at the right time. The fourth tenet is the gut and bowel component. Now, so far the tenets are pretty universal and they apply to everyone. This fourth tenet, I think, still applies to most people. One thing I learned early on in my journey of recovering from PFD is that if I ate the wrong things, I would have some digestive upset, and that would, of course, would cause some problems the next day. And so the gut bowel health component is an important one because we can almost take steps backwards. We can reverse some of the efforts that we've made in recovery by straining when we're using the restroom, by eating things that don't agree with the stomach, if you know what I'm talking about. Food can also cause inflammation, joint inflammation, muscle inflammation, but also of the stomach, the intestines, and all of the microbiome that's supposed to be helping us have healthy bowel movements. I had to clean up my diet a lot when I was dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction, and that kind of settled things down a little bit when I wasn't having 8 or 9 bowel movements a day.
Oh my God.
Don't judge me. Cleaning up your diet and reducing the irritants and things that can cause the inflammation is going to be paramount towards your healing. So if you find yourself straining, if you find yourself regularly constipated, if you find yourself bloated, if you find yourself constantly dealing with incomplete evacuations or pain when using the restroom, know that if you take some steps to improve your gut microbiome, cleaning up your diet, spacing out your meals, even considering intermittent fasting, you can kind of slow everything down to the point where things are passing smoothly and not causing you so much trouble. In addition, hydration and supplementation are important. Making sure that you're properly hydrated, which frankly can be a challenge, especially if you're dealing with urinary frequency, but you can properly hydrate yourself and set yourself up for success when you're using the restroom and not causing additional pain and straining from bowel movements. Also, proper mechanics when using the restroom is important as well. It's important not to sit there for hours on end trying to get every last little bit out. And so there's a bit of a give and take. And again, we're going to cover this at length in the video that deals with this tenet. But I want you to know, again, you have some powerful tools in your toolbox to set you up for success in recovery. The final tenet is the sexual health component. Many find their way to chronic pelvic pain as a result of injury or trauma to the genitals. For some, it could have resulted from an addiction to pornography or excessive masturbation and edging. For others, it may be regretful encounters and the guilt and the shame that's associated with that. And while injuries can typically heal over time, including direct injuries to the genitals, repetitive stressors can slow or even worsen your recovery. So it's important to understand that excessive sexual activity can cause your pelvic floor dysfunction to start, and it can cause it to keep going. And so, especially in the beginning, it's important to understand the relationship that sexual activity has with your body and take things a little bit easier. Finding the right balance of healthy sexual activity is absolutely key. And this may look like a season of practiced abstinence or limiting your sexual activity to maybe just every once in a while. Now, if you deal with an addiction to pornography, you are not alone. I have been in your shoes before, and so are many, many other guys who are still struggling with this particular addiction. Know that you can be free. You can overcome this terrible habit, and you can find victory and freedom in abstaining. In the future video on this topic, I'm going to share with you some very powerful tools to help you overcome your addiction to pornography if that's what you're dealing with. And if you're dealing with excessive masturbation or edging, know that you can be free from those habits as well. So finally, I have a question for you. Out of all of these 5 tenets, which one stands out to you the most? Which one can you relate to the most? And which one do you think you could start applying right now? Is it your stress and anxiety level? Know that you can bring those down. Is it the neuromuscular component, the subconscious clenching, the tight muscles? Know that you can learn to lengthen them and relax them. Is it musculoskeletal imbalances? Do you suffer from an excessively weak core or excessively weak glutes? Know that there are steps you can take to strengthen your body, to establish a healthy foundation of good muscular tone. Do you have a poor relationship with food? Are you eating the wrong things? Do you have a terrible bowel schedule? Know that you can modify your life and your diet to make things a little bit easier on your pelvic floor. And is your relationship with sex broken? Do you struggle with things? Know that this too can be changed. Please make sure you like this video and you subscribe to this channel if you want to see future video updates on these topics. They're going to be coming out. I'm going to try to do one a week for the next few weeks here, so I appreciate your patience. In the meantime, stay strong and keep it loose. that not only help me so if you're currently dealing with pelvic pain and pelvic floor, why do I blink my eyes? Why do... I feel good. Let's crack this egg open and make a mess. Oh, I'm still recording.